trials, pigs and goats in court. In the dim glow of a fading medieval sun, when bells tolled across muddy market squares and justice was measured out with rope, flame, and iron, there emerged a practice so strange that it startles even the most hardened historian: the trials of animals. Beasts of field and sty, pigs, goats, dogs, even insects, were hauled before human judges, condemned in solemn words, and punished as though they bore the weight of human sin. To step into this world is to walk along a narrow path where superstition, law, and cruelty converged in equal measure. It began most often in villages, where daily life was lived in proximity to animals. A pig was more than livestock. It was a source of food, wealth, and labor. Goats were milk, skin, and survival itself. But they were also unruly, unpredictable, and, so people believed, capable of being influenced by darker forces. In an age when calamity was explained by God's wrath or the devil's schemes, it was not strange for villagers to believe that an animal that bit a child or trampled an elder was more than mere flesh. It was evil, and therefore subject to the same law as man. Court records from France, Switzerland, and the German states describe these grim proceedings. A pig that mauled a child might be arrested, shackled, and dragged into court. The bailiff would read the charges aloud, as though the beast could understand. "You are accused of murder most foul, of slaying an innocent." Witnesses were called: neighbors who had seen the attack, priests who gave testimony of the child's soul, and sometimes even family members who demanded justice for the blood spilled. The pig, squatting in its pen, squealed and thrashed, unaware that its fate was sealed. One such case, recorded in 1386 in the French village of Falaise, still chills the imagination. A sow was accused of killing a young boy. The townspeople, outraged and grieving, demanded punishment. And so the sow was tried like a murderer. Clothed in human garments, dressed in a jacket and breeches, paraded through the square to the place of execution. Before the gathered villagers, the sow was hanged from a gallows. Chroniclers note that the crowd treated it as both spectacle and warning. A lesson that crime, even from beastly mouths and hooves, would not go unpunished. Children watched as the animal twisted in the noose, their parents whispering of justice, though deep within, it was fear that was fed. The fear of living in a world where chaos could be made sense of only through ritualized cruelty. Goats, too, bore the brunt of human suspicion. Their eyes, with strange rectangular pupils, unnerved the medieval mind. Their horns, their stubbornness, their association with wild places and pagan rites marked them as creatures dangerously close to the devil himself. Records survive of goats brought into ecclesiastical courts, accused not of mere violence but of fornication and witchcraft. A goat that had been seen consorting too closely with a man or woman could be charged as a partner in sin. Judges, wearing robes heavy with churchly authority, would thunder of abominations against nature, citing scripture to prove that beasts could indeed carry guilt. Such trials were no farce in their day. They were serious, solemn affairs, carried out with ceremony and order. The church sanctioned them, and civil courts enforced their rulings. Animals were assigned legal counsel, lawyers tasked with defending their innocence. There are cases where these advocates spoke eloquently on behalf of their clients, arguing that a pig should not be punished, for it was acting on instinct, not malice; that a goat could not be guilty, for it lacked reason. But reason itself had little weight against fear. Consider the case of 1457 in Savigny, France. A sow and her 6 piglets were accused of killing and devouring a child. The mother was hanged, but the piglets, being young and unaware of their crime, were pardoned. It was an eerie mirror of human justice, a mockery of mercy extended to animals, as though they stood on equal footing in law. Yet beneath it all was a grim necessity. Punishment was not just about guilt. It was about calming the rage of the people, about showing that order reigned over chaos, that blood spilt would not go unanswered. The spectacle of such trials was not confined to pigs and goats. Bulls, horses, dogs, and even rats and locusts were summoned before courts. Insects were excommunicated for destroying crops. Rats were given notice to appear in court and explain their absence when they failed to arrive. But it was the pigs and goats, so close to human households, so present in daily life, that bore the brunt of medieval wrath. Imagine the scene. A goat tethered in the marketplace, the crowd jeering, stones clattering at its hooves. The judge sits upon a wooden dais, a clerk scribbling the record. Witnesses speak of unnatural behavior, how the goat leapt upon a woman, how it rammed a child, how its eyes glowed red in the candlelight of the barn. Fear transforms memory, and memory shapes testimony, until the beast becomes a vessel of evil. When the sentence is read, death by hanging or burning, the crowd exhales in relief. The threat is ended, justice has spoken, and the world feels safer, if only for a day. But beneath the surface lies something deeper. These trials reveal the medieval struggle to make sense of a harsh and unpredictable world. Disease struck without warning, storms ruined crops, children died in their sleep. Every loss demanded a reason, and often that reason was sought not in chance but in guilt. Animals, dumb and helpless, became scapegoats for human sorrow. To punish them was to assert control, to say that law extended even to the mute beasts of the field. There was also a darker reflection here. By treating animals as human, these trials exposed the brutality of human justice itself. The same rope that tightened around a pig's neck was used on thieves and heretics. The same flames that consumed a goat lit the pyres of accused witches. To watch an animal die in the square was to rehearse, in miniature, the terror that might one day fall upon any member of the crowd should fortune turn against them. The clergy, too, found use in these ceremonies. To condemn a beast was to remind the faithful of sin's corruption, to paint a living picture of divine judgment. A pig in a noose was more than a punishment. It was a sermon in flesh, warning that transgression, however small, led only to death. Children grew up watching, learning that justice was swift and merciless, that the world was bound by rules as tight as the ropes of the gallows. Yet not all voices agreed. There were whispers of protest, murmurs that such trials were folly. Philosophers and jurists sometimes questioned their logic, pointing out that beasts could not discern right from wrong, that instinct was not crime. But such words often carried little weight against the traditions of law and the appetite of the crowd. The trials continued, century after century, until reason slowly displaced superstition, and animals were once more reduced to property rather than persons before the law. Still, the memory lingers. The chronicles tell us of pigs clothed as criminals, goats condemned as sinners, animals dragged through courts and squares to suffer human punishments. And in those stories, we see the reflection of a world where fear shaped justice, where cruelty was cloaked in ceremony, and where the line between man and beast blurred in the shadow of the gallows. To walk through a medieval town on the day of such a trial was to step into theater as much as judgment. The bells called the people, the streets filled with villagers hungry for spectacle. Children perched on barrels to see over the crowd. Merchants abandoned their stalls. Bakers left their ovens. The pig or goat, bewildered, dragged forward by rope or chain, squealed or bleated in protest. The priest raised his hand, calling for silence. The judge read the charges in grave Latin or French. The people waited for the verdict they already knew was coming. When the rope tightened, or the fire roared, a collective sigh moved through the crowd. Some crossed themselves, whispering prayers. Others jeered, throwing scraps and stones. The animal thrashed and then stilled, The executioner wiped his brow. The trial was over. Justice had been done, or so they believed. What remains for us today is the unease of looking back. We laugh at the absurdity of pigs in court, goats in chains. But beneath the laughter is discomfort, for the cruelty is real, the blood true, the fear palpable. These were not tales spun to amuse. They were the lived experiences of villages and towns across medieval Europe. They reveal a society grappling with forces it could not understand, reaching for control through rituals of punishment, binding chaos with ropes and fire. And so, the memory of animal trials lingers in history's shadow. Pigs hanged from gallows, goats burned for sin, creatures judged in courts that mirrored the fate of their human masters. A grim theater of justice, where man and beast stood side by side before the law, and both were found guilty beneath the unblinking eyes of the crowd.